Ukraine's interceptor drones are already flying in the Gulf states, but Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has been dropping hints. More is coming, and even the U.S. isn't ready for this. Ukraine is gearing up to release something massive in the Strait of Hormuz. Blockade? What blockade? Iran can't stop what's coming as Ukraine is stepping up to deliver the exact thing that Iran's regime never wanted to see in its vital waterway. Speaking at a security summit on the Strait of Hormuz, Zelenskyy said the words that every Gulf state wanted to hear. Also, if we have our drone deal with Middle Eastern countries, our sea drones are included in it. Therefore, anything can appear. We can join in on defense. We can help with convoys, Zelenskyy told the gathered delegates. In one fell swoop, Zelenskyy established that Ukraine has gone from a country that relied on others to combat Russia's war of aggression to a powerful military nation that is capable of helping others in their time of need. Ukraine has already sent drone experts to the Middle East. Over 200 of its best and brightest are working with the Gulf states to help them figure out how to use interceptor drones to stop Iran's swooping Shaheds in their tracks. Those experts are even directly destroying Iran's Shaheds, at least if Zelenskyy is to be believed. So what we're seeing here is a step up. The interceptors are already flying. Now the naval drones are coming, and as you'll soon find out, they can do a lot more than take out the vessels that Iran is deploying into the Strait of Hormuz. Zelenskyy's big hint came during an online security summit that was held in advance of a follow-up summit that the UK is set to host in London. That summit will involve 35 nations and is set to cover how the collective West, seemingly minus the US, is going to move towards securing the Strait of Hormuz in the wake of Operation Epic Fury. The UK's Prime Minister Keir Starmer says that this upcoming summit will assess all viable diplomatic and political measures we can take to restore freedom of navigation, guarantee the safety of trapped ships and seafarers, and to resume the movement of vital commodities. For Ukraine, this is an opportunity. Zelenskyy has just told us precisely how his country intends to make itself one of the key players in the Gulf region. Ukraine's president also mentioned the decade-long deals with Gulf states, which will be the route through which Ukraine's seaborne drones make it into the Strait of Hormuz. Those states have felt the impact of Operation Epic Fury and the Strait of Hormuz blockades in their pocketbooks. According to analyst Oguzhan Akiner, daily exports of oil from Iraq, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain, and the United Arab Emirates, or UAE, have already dropped from 12.3 million barrels to 7.8 million by the end of March. All told, the AA outlet says, the cost to these nations when combining lost oil and gas revenue with damage done to them by Iran's missiles and Shahed drones could exceed $50 billion by the time that the war is over. Those Gulf states need an ally who can help them defend their ships and infrastructure against Iran's drones. Ukraine has stepped up. On April 19th, just a couple of days before Zelenskyy dropped the biggest hint yet that sea drones are on their way to the Gulf, Ukraine officially reached agreements on 10-year defense deals with Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. Those deals have been in the works for some time. Now pen has been put to paper, and Zelenskyy suggests that this may be the starting point for something much bigger. We have agreed on 10-year contracts already with 3 key countries, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, and Qatar. We already have requests from 11 countries, the Middle East and the Gulf, and are also gradually looking toward the Caucasus, Zelenskyy said when announcing the deals. These deals are as important for Ukraine as they are for the Gulf states. As Politico points out, Ukraine has used these deals to secure an oil lifeline following a winter where Russia constantly struck Ukraine's energy grids and infrastructure. Crude oil will be delivered to European refineries to be turned into fuel that will head to Ukraine, Zelenskyy says. In some cases, the Gulf states will be providing diesel directly. Financial assistance and missile interceptors will also be coming Ukraine's way, demonstrating that these deals aren't a case of one-way traffic of Ukrainian drones to the Gulf. Ukraine is being treated as an equal partner, and that means it's getting as good as it gives. We also can't ignore what this latest morsel of information from Zelenskyy means for Ukraine's position with its Western partners. Ukraine's president has smartly told the very people who have spent 4 years helping Ukraine to battle against Russian aggression that it's ready to help. The UK, at the very least, seems keen to see Ukraine's naval drones enter the Strait of Hormuz. Starmer labeled the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz a global responsibility ahead of the virtual conference, where Zelenskyy dropped his hint. We must reassure commercial shipping and support mine clearance operations to ensure a return to global stability and security, Starmer has declared. Part of reassuring commercial shipping will be ensuring that non-military vessels have protection against future Iranian Shahed and fast boat raids. Ukraine's naval drones are perfect for that task. The UK recognizes that fact, and it has already said that Ukraine could play a useful role in the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. That useful role isn't limited to providing naval drones and interceptors. Ukraine has experience in dealing with blockades, specifically the ones that Russia tried to put in place in Ukraine's key food security corridors in the Black Sea. Granted, Ukraine was dealing with Russian warships operating as part of the Black Sea Fleet, rather than the drones and fast boats that Iran is using in the Strait of Hormuz. But many of the weapons that it used to clear that blockade, including the naval drones that now seem to be heading to the Gulf, were key in that operation. Ukraine has the blueprint and, most importantly, the combat-tested expertise that demonstrates its drones will work in the Gulf. Ukraine's drones are ready to go. But there's one unexpected barrier that the country may have to overcome. We mentioned earlier that the U.S. wasn't formally involved in the conference where Zelenskyy made his announcement. There could be all sorts of reasons for that, but one of them may be that the U.S. believes that it has its own solution for the Strait of Hormuz. America has responded to Iran's blockade and the regime's refusal to negotiate a deal that suits the U.S. by creating a blockade of its own. For that reason, Zelenskyy dropping the kinds of hints that he has just dropped will be as much of a shock to the U.S. as it is to an Iranian regime that wants to dominate in Hormuz using its asymmetric tactics. At the time of this video's creation, the U.S. blockade was still in force. On April 20th, U.S. President Donald Trump announced that the U.S. has no intention of lifting the blockade until a deal is reached with Iran. Trump seems happy with the blockade's effects. In an April 20th post on Truth Social, Trump declared that the U.S. blockade is absolutely destroying Iran and that it is costing the Iranian regime a staggering $500 million per day. The U.S. and Iran also don't seem to be getting much closer to striking a deal that would end the U.S. blockade. Despite talks being ongoing, both countries are engaged in tit-for-tat threatening of each other. Also, on April 20th, Iran said that it would retaliate after the U.S. seized an Iranian cargo tanker the day before. Trump has claimed that the U.S. will start attacking civilian infrastructure in Iran if future negotiations fail, while Iran is still far from a certainty to even turn up to the latest talks in Pakistan. So, the Strait of Hormuz situation is still unstable, and the question has to be asked: would the U.S. be happy to see Ukraine's naval drones enter the waterway? That's a difficult question to answer. On March 5th, which was around the one-week point of Operation Epic Fury, Zelenskyy claimed that the U.S. had asked for Ukraine's help to combat Iran's Shahed drones. Ukraine's president said at the time that Ukraine would be more than willing to swap its interceptor drones and expertise for Patriot air defenses with the U.S. Trump seemed open to the help at the time. He even said that he would take any assistance from any country in the wake of Zelensky's remarks. But just 11 days later, The Independent was reporting that the U.S. had snubbed Ukraine's offers to help by providing its drone tech. As is so often the case, Ukraine doesn't quite know where it stands with the U.S. That leads us back to Zelensky's big hint. If the U.S. doesn't want Ukraine's help in the Strait of Hormuz, then Ukraine won't chase. It will bypass. That's what the decade-long defense deals with Gulf nations are really all about, as Ukraine is setting itself up as the supplier of key weapons to nations that have been impacted by American and Iranian actions in the Strait of Hormuz. Let's come back to the weapons themselves. Ukraine's interceptor drones are already flying in the Gulf region. Now, Ukraine is stepping up to deliver naval drones to its new Gulf partners. But will these drones really make the sort of massive difference in the Strait of Hormuz that could end the blockade once and for all? Before we answer that question, this is a quick reminder that you're watching the military show. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is the perfect time before we get into what Ukraine's sea drones really have to offer. Now, we know the basics of sea drones. These unmanned surface vessels are remotely controlled and can be used to deliver powerful warheads to ships. That's all well and good, and Ukraine has been using its naval drones for that purpose in the Black Sea for years. But Ukraine never stands still. It innovates constantly, and some recent developments in the sea drone space have taken these weapons from being a nice-to-have in the Strait of Hormuz to potentially blockade-ending assets that the Gulf states and the Western nations that want to reopen the waterway could use. First, we go back to March 17. On that date, Militarny reported on a remarkable achievement made by one of Ukraine's Magura V7 drones. This achievement hadn't been made public until this point. It actually happened in September 2025, when Ukraine was taking part in the NATO REPMIS and Dynamic Messenger exercises that were held off the Portuguese coast. Those exercises involved Blues, which were NATO forces, and Reds, which just so happened to be using Ukraine's Magura V7 drones to combat NATO's warships in a wargame scenario. 5 scenarios were created for these wargames. In all 5, the Reds defeated the Blues. To do so, the Reds used different versions of the Magura V7 naval drone, which were adapted to serve specific purposes in each exercise. One case saw a Magura equipped with reconnaissance gear to help the Reds guide traffic off the coast of Portugal. Another saw Ukraine's drone loaded with a machine gun that it could use to blast away at threats on the water. But the biggest achievement for the Magura, by far, was the simulated sinking of at least one NATO frigate. Under the rules of the wargames, a victory was counted if one of Ukraine's drones managed to lock onto a target, such as the radar system of a ship, without being detected by the Blues. The Magura succeeded over and over again. This is the type of naval drone that is going to be heading to the Gulf, and Iran has to be worried. The Magura V7 has been around since 2025. It has a cruising speed of 23 knots, though it can reach a top speed of 39 knots, more than enough for it to be able to engage in chases with Iran's fast boats, if the situation calls for it. The standard version of the drone can stay at sea for a solid 48 hours, and it has a range of 800 nautical miles. Most worryingly for Iran, the Magura V7 can carry a 650-kilogram or over 1,400-pound payload. We already know that's enough to sink a NATO frigate during war games. For the much smaller boats that Iran is trying to use to dominate the Strait of Hormuz, that kind of explosive power is a death sentence. So the Gulf nations may be getting their hands on a sea drone that can deal with threats presented by Iran's navy. But what about Iran's Shahed drones? Those drones have been flying all over the Strait of Hormuz, targeting commercial vessels and essentially preventing the Gulf states from getting their oil and cargo to other nations. Ukraine has already provided a solution to the Shaheds in the form of its interceptor drones. However, those drones are at their best when defending static targets that are on the territory of the nation that is using them. Commercial ships aren't static targets, but this doesn't mean that Ukraine's sea drones can't help to tackle Iran's Shahed threat in the Strait of Hormuz. On April 19th, Militarny broke the news that Ukraine has used a naval drone carrier to intercept a Russian Shahed-type drone for the first time. What we saw in this operation was Ukraine managing to use one of its naval drones as a mothership for aerial drones, which were launched into the skies from the sea drone itself. Ukraine hasn't revealed which of its naval drones it used for this operation. However, March saw reports that Ukraine had modified some of its Magura drones to make them capable of carrying and launching interceptor drones, so that seems like a pretty big clue. Ukraine has also released footage of its world-first achievement. The video shows one of Ukraine's interceptors hurtling into the skies after being unleashed from the deck of a naval drone. The view then switches to that being captured by the interceptor as it bears down on the Russian Shahed drone. Static follows. The drone scored a direct hit. And just like that, Ukraine has revealed that it has expanded its ability to deal with aerial drone threats. The concept of launching aerial drones from a naval drone isn't new for Ukraine. It has done it before, primarily using FPV drones launched from its sea drones to take out much larger Russian aerial assets, such as helicopters. But this is the first time that we've seen Ukraine's new breed of interceptors being launched from one of its sea drones. The synergy is clear to see. Ukraine is already shipping interceptors to the Gulf region. Now it is showcasing new capabilities in its sea drones that allow the Gulf states to sail their interceptors into the Strait of Hormuz. Think about the possibilities here. The likes of Saudi Arabia and Qatar will be able to send their tankers into the Strait of Hormuz alongside a hidden Maghera presence. If a Shahid emerges, the Maghera pops up and unleashes an interceptor. And if a fast boat attempts to intercept, the Maghera can fire on it with a machine gun or, if needed, obliterate the Iranian boat using its massive explosive payload. And on top of all of this, we can't forget what Ukraine's naval drones have achieved in the past. These drones are one of the biggest reasons why a third of Russia's notorious Black Sea Fleet had been taken out by March 2024. Naval drones, along with missiles and aerial drones, have been hitting Russia's warships so hard that they have been forced to withdraw from Crimea. Now, those ships linger in the mainland port of Novorossiysk, having been pushed away from occupied Crimea. Russia's warships rarely sail now. They know that Ukraine's sea drones await them. Ukraine has also used the types of drones that Zelenskyy hints are coming to the Gulf to disable at least one Russian submarine. Iran just so happens to have an estimated 28 to 30 submarines in its fleet. Those subs aren't safe if Ukrainian sea drones enter the Strait of Hormuz. Ukraine has also used its naval drones to attack the Kerch Bridge that links occupied Crimea to the Russian mainland. So you can throw strikes against sea-based infrastructure into the mix of what the Gulf states are going to be getting from Ukraine. We wonder if kamikaze Maghera drones will soon be finding their way to Iranian ports to stop fast boat launches at their source. It's this level of versatility that makes Ukraine's sea drones such a vital asset in the Strait of Hormuz. Almost nothing that Iran might deploy in that waterway will be safe from these drones. Shahids can be taken down by interceptors launched from the decks of Ukraine's naval drones. Any boat that Iran sends into the Strait of Hormuz, from fast boats to warships and even to submarines, is at risk. Ukraine's drones can hit them all, and with Ukraine having over 200 of its drone experts already stationed in the Gulf region, Ukraine's new partners will be able to learn about and deploy its new drones based on a blueprint that has already been proven to work against Russia. As for Ukraine, it will take another huge step toward becoming a powerhouse player in the Gulf region when its sea drones arrive. Thus, Ukraine's transformation will be complete. When Russia invaded in February 2022, Ukraine had a military that largely relied on Soviet-era equipment. It still managed to survive, and waves of Western support helped in the years that followed. But Ukraine is now so much more than it was. The country leads the world in drone development, and it has the solutions that the Gulf nations need to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Ukrainian naval drones are about to be unleashed into the one place where Iran doesn't want to see them. The regime can't do a thing about what's coming. Ukraine's latest move just adds to what it has already been doing in the Strait of Hormuz. We've touched on interceptor drones and 10-year deals in this video. Now, find out how Ukraine is using its wealth of experience in dealing with Russia to turn itself into one of the most important partners that the Gulf state will ever have. Check out our video, which covers how Ukraine is building unexpected alliances and what all of this means for Russia. And if you enjoyed this video, remember to subscribe to The Military Show to ensure you never miss our coverage of the latest developments in Ukraine and the Gulf.